Hey guys, welcome to the show. This is Eric Beltran, your host. Today we're joined by special guest Alex Winnicki. He is the director of sport nutrition for Liberty University. So, Alex, super happy to have you on. I know you're going to give us some great information, and we're really excited.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, of course, of course. So let's get straight into it. Now we're talking for in-season women's soccer athletes. Okay, what does
Mhm.
proper fueling look like? Maybe what are some misconceptions? I know there's a lot of people that will listen to this that are maybe high school student athletes, and
Mhm.
so just kind of educating them. Okay, I think this could be a differentiation between taking their game from here to here, and so yeah, just shed some light on this topic for us.
Okay. So really big topic there. So I mean, we could go all sorts of directions there, but I'll kind of start with maybe like the my nutrition 101 speech that I give to a lot of our student athletes at Liberty. In the hierarchy of importance, I always start with adequacy. That's the bottom of that pyramid. I start with adequacy and then I build to balance. From balance, I go to variety, then timing, and then there's everything else. And I'll elaborate on each one of those steps. But I think if you keep that hierarchy in mind throughout this conversation, we can take it broad in terms of just general health and wellness. And then we can narrow it down to that in season. How is this elevating my game and, preparing me for my match or helping me recover from my match? So when I mention adequacy, by that I mean, are you getting enough energy overall? Are we getting enough calories? In that block, you could have a peanut butter and jelly sandwich 6 times a day, and that's all right. I'm getting enough, right? But there's really no balance in that. There's really not a lot of variety in that. But you're able to still grow and function and be a person even on 6 PB&Js, right? So are we getting enough overall? Well, all right, let's take that a step further and go, well, I don't just get 6 PB&Js. I also get, because maybe that's not enough protein and probably not enough carbohydrates for a soccer player. So when I say balance, I mean, do I have a proper portion of carbohydrates, fat, and protein in my diet? Specifically for soccer players, we want to like narrow that down a little bit more. Am I doing carbohydrate periodization correctly? And that means today's a match day. I need an elevated amount of carbohydrates because of how hard and demanding the match is going to be, right? If I was just sleeping all day and sitting on the couch or laying in bed, I probably wouldn't need as many carbohydrates, right? Carbohydrates are the energy substrate that we're going to use during a game. So if I've got a practice and a lift, if I've got a match, if it's a really hard practice or a really long practice, I need to elevate my carbohydrate needs, right? The same way as if I'm going through a really hard training program, I might need to elevate my protein needs to compensate and to help my muscles repair. So that balance piece is depending on what I'm doing, am I adjusting correctly my carbohydrates, fat, and protein levels? And then we go to variety. Well, maybe you were getting a PB&J and a protein shake and an apple, right? All right, so there's some balance in there. We have more carbohydrates. We've got maybe the correct mix of things, but that's all you're eating every day. Well, we might be missing out on a lot of vitamins and minerals that could help us grow, that could help us repair muscle tissue, that could help just basic biological functions. So maybe we don't just have PBJs, protein shakes, and apples. Maybe we also have oranges and apples and bananas and grapes, right? And that apply the same thing to not just a protein shake, but steak, chicken, pork, seafood. So are you getting a variety of that blend of macronutrients? And then timing. Timing in general, like, for general health purposes, are you eating just one meal a day? And are you able to actually get all you need in that one meal a day? Probably not. Okay, so are you getting 3 meals a day? Okay, great. For general health purposes, most people do really well on 3 meals a day. For an athlete, are we getting 3 meals and 2 to 3 snacks a day? Is that timed correctly? And if we're missing out on that for skipping breakfast, if we're not getting a pregame or a post-game snack, are we able to time our nutrients to help our body or to help our performance? And if we're missing one of those, are we actually able to get that adequacy piece, right? Because that timing, I can't eat 5,000 calories in 2 meals. So the timing piece goes right back down to the adequacy piece. And then supplements and I don't know, like individualization, that goes into that top of the pyramid, everything else. And I would say on a macro level, on a big picture level, to me, that is proper fueling. Going through those steps and asking yourselves those questions. Am I getting each one of those blocks? That's proper fueling. In terms of maybe some specifics on that, I think we could get into maybe like congested like schedules.
Mm-hmm.
Like on the NCAA level, we play Thursdays and Sundays, right?
Yep.
So, you know, that pyramid's really important, generally speaking, but in season specifically, to your question. All right, so it's not just I'm getting more carbohydrates during my match and I'm getting a protein shake after my game, but after a soccer game, your glycogen stores, your stored carbohydrate in your muscle and your liver can be, up to 50 to 75% depleted. So imagine your gas tank in your car dropping from full to, close to a quarter of a tank, a third of a tank. Well, if we're not prioritizing more carbohydrates on that Friday, on that Saturday, well, if we have an earlier game on Sunday, there's a good chance that we're going in with not a full tank. And if on the first game I emptied my tank, 50 to 75%, and I go in with a half tank on Sunday's game, I might not have enough to really get through my match. Or maybe I could get through it, but in the second half, I wasn't able to sprint as much. I wasn't able to cover as much distance. So I think those are my big ticket items with in-season fueling, and we can go really deep on any one of those topics.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And I know you're more than willing to do that. Obviously, you're so passionate about this topic, and so yeah, it's great to see you be able to nerd out about it. A couple of things you mentioned brought up some questions. Okay, so you mentioned for Sunday afternoon kickoff, okay, that it's not only important to fuel with carbohydrates on the Saturday, but also the Friday as well. Okay, so now we're getting into that timing piece. I think a lot of people just think, hey, like, really haven't been taking care of my diet for the rest of this week, but how important is it to start hydrating or getting the right carbs even 2 days before a game? Like what type of impact does that help? I know some people have a misconception like, oh, I'll just have pasta, the meal before. Well, maybe 2 meals before is just as important. So maybe touch on some of that piece.
Yeah. And so like I was mentioning, if we're, if we have a hard match on Thursday and it could take 48 to 72 hours of a lot of carbohydrate to replenish your glycogen stores. Right. So when we ingest carbohydrates, that goes to our liver, it's put into our bloodstream, it's used by working muscles, it's used by your brain. Excess is stored in your liver, it's stored in your muscles, and it's after that there's some stored as fat tissue, right? So it's really easy to deplete your glycogen stores, your stored carbohydrate, but it can be really challenging to get all of that back, right? And again, going back to that, how much can you eat in one meal? Because you can always burn more than you can eat during a game, right? You're going to have one opportunity during a match really to eat besides from like warm-ups. So you can always burn more than you can actually ingest. So we really have to have that in mind, that this is not just a one meal thing and I'm back to normal in terms of my glycogen usage, especially if you've been playing a lot of minutes. So and you're probably not taking Monday through Wednesday off. You're also probably having maybe a hard practice on Tuesday, or you're probably doing some strength and conditioning stuff. You're still taxing your body on those days. So to make sure that you're replenishing your glycogen stores is going to be important throughout the entire week. And as I mentioned earlier, carbohydrate periodization on my high days, on my high demand days, am I increasing my intake specifically of carbohydrate? And then it might be that on some of your rest days, you still need to keep an elevated amount just to play catch up and to consistently come into your event or your practice or your training with adequate stores. You can kind of think of nutrition as like nutrition's not going to win you a soccer game, but it will definitely lose it for you, right? So
Mm.
we're trying to mitigate fatigue. We're trying to mitigate you running out of gas. I'm trying to mitigate you losing a lot of body water, like through dehydration, right? I'm not trying to get you to eat 2,000 calories during a game. It's all about mitigating losses on nutrition.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good example. So I don't think people realize just how much gets taken out of the body during a soccer match. Okay. And
Mhm.
so you're talking like we play in August, we play in September, some hot months. I've seen center mids run like 10 miles a game.
Mhm.
Okay. And so they're obviously losing a lot. But I also, I just finished my 6 year coaching and I see a lot of players um eating half a salad and an apple before a game. Okay. And so I know you have some thoughts on this. So kind of give us some like do's and don'ts, or maybe some common errors you've seen with regards to pregame meal. And I also think you're a big proponent of in-game fuel. And so not a lot of people do that. I always think back to my youth soccer days with, the soccer mom bringing the sliced apples and oranges.
Yeah.
But I think some of that stuff is pretty key. And so if you could touch on those two pieces for us.
Sure. Why don't we walk through? We'll walk through the pre and the during, and then maybe we'll hit the post game. Like maybe some common issues, and then maybe like what's right. And
Right.
that might look different for everybody. Some common problems that I see a lot, at least at the NCAA level, not consuming enough carbohydrates over the week, which we just touched on.
Mm-hmm.
So making sure we're coming into like throughout the week, we're topped off on our energy stores, and then coming into the match prepared and ready to roll. Coming into the game dehydrated, same thing, right? But same thing, but fluids instead of carbohydrates or energy. We often will do urine testing for dehydration the day before our matches. We do that for both men's and women's soccer. I think we did it once or twice this past season. And athletes are always shocked to find, well, I drank water like all morning and then I came in and still dehydrated. And like, yeah, well, if we weren't consistent yesterday, you just don't have enough time this morning to like play catch up, right? And so apply that to a game day where, all right, well, I was really dehydrated yesterday, and I'm waking up at 9 o'clock, and my game's at 1. Uh, do you have enough time to actually adequately hydrate? Maybe, maybe not. Not adjusting to the circumstances. That being, you're playing more minutes. You're not adjusting your energy intake based on that. It's really hot or really humid out. Maybe you're going to Florida somewhere, and same old plan, same thing I'm going to do up here like in breezy Lynchburg, Virginia, where we're close to the mountains and it's nice and cool. I'm going to do my same nutrition and hydration plan here as I will in South Florida. Um, not adjusting for the circumstances. I'd say probably the next one would be, as you mentioned, kind of, I'm going to have mac and cheese and a salad, and then that's my pregame meal. That goes back to the adequate carbohydrate intake over the course of the week and leading up to pregame. Carbohydrates are the main source of fuel for the body in soccer. Soccer is high intensity, it's explosive. Your body is going to rely on carbohydrate stores. The point of a pregame meal is to top off your liver glycogen stores so that you have a full gas tank, and to make sure that you're topped off on your muscle glycogen stores so that you have a full gas tank. If when you go to sleep the day before a match, overnight, your body is still pumping your heart, your lungs are still breathing, your brain is still using carbohydrates to function, you're still alive, you're still burning through carbohydrates. So when you wake up, you are at a deficit no matter who you are. So if we're having no breakfast or a really light breakfast, or then maybe just a salad for pregame, are we able to come back from that deficit that we had overnight? Are we able to top off and make sure that we're ready to roll for that game? Probably not. So that's a very common mistake I see for people. And it stems from different things. I think some of it can be fear of carbohydrates, and some of it could just be from, maybe not hearing a conversation like this. So yeah, those are some of my common problems that I see. Um, Any questions or comments on that?
Yeah, I have a few. And maybe you were going to get into this in a second, but you touched on the hydration piece, and it was, I'm thinking back to the conversation you had with our team in the fall. Um, a couple of things that were interesting to me about hydration is, and I think a lot of people, get misconstrued, is they think hydration is only your fluid intake.
Mhm.
And also the other piece was you made an interesting point to us about if I get dehydrated and I notice that, I'm gonna be like, okay, I'm gonna just start chugging water.
Mhm.
And sometimes that can be counterproductive. Okay. So maybe if you could talk on those two things.
Sure. Yeah. So going into hydration specifically, similar to nutrition, we want to be spreading our hydration out throughout the day to be consistently hydrating, not just all at one period, right? I don't want to have just one meal a day. And same way, I don't want to just chug 2 gallons of water at one point during the day, right? Not very productive, probably not going to facilitate your needs, and probably will lead to some bad side effects. So the same principle holds true for hydration, where we want to be consistently hydrating throughout the day and elevating, just like we do with carbohydrates, elevating our hydration based on humidity, based on temperature, based on the clothing that we're wearing, based on if there is shade or there's no shade, and based on exercise intensity and duration. So we want to adjust according to those things. So just like I was mentioning with, all right, it's 55 degrees in Lynchburg and cool. Like, well, I've been drinking about this much water during a game. All right, well, I'm going to go down to Jacksonville, Florida, and I'm going to drink about the same. Probably won't end up too well, considering that you're going to have an increased sweat rate from the heat and the humidity in Jacksonville. So we always need to be adjusting for that, and then also adding some electrolytes to help our body hold on to that water. So getting into like kind of the proper way to hydrate, really, if you're reasonably hydrated, you probably only need about half a liter of water in the 2 to 4 hours prior to a game, right? So just sipping on fluids should be adequate if you're reasonably hydrated. Adding carbohydrates in your pregame meal or in your drink will help with that hydration, as will adding electrolytes. Carbohydrates and sodium go in through the kind of like the same door in your cells. So when I'm absorbing carbohydrates into my cells, some sodium can get in there with it. So having carbohydrates and sodium together, they both get to, like, when that door is open to the cell to like make sure I'm filling up my gas tank, both of them can kind of get in there together. So sipping on fluids with electrolytes along with consuming carbohydrates in your pregame meal, really good way to hydrate. And then if, let's say, we're all right, well, I think I'm dehydrated. Maybe you're an easy way to tell is thirst, urine color, changes in short-term changes in body weight, and then maybe the color and elasticity of your skin. So you can kind of actually like pinch your skin, and if it snaps back, you're pretty reasonably hydrated. But if it actually kind of like you pinch it and it kind of stays like that pinch, it's one way of kind of telling like, all right, I'm pretty dehydrated right now.
Hmm.
So using those couple things, you can kind of tell if I'm hydrated or dehydrated. Um, well, if you're dehydrated, sipping on fluids with electrolytes and carbohydrates is the best way to rehydrate. Chugging water will only increase urine output. So when you ingest food or fluid, your stomach expands, and there's mechanical sensors in your stomach that say, hey, there's a lot of stuff in here. Why don't let's get this going, right? So if we are telling our body, hey, let's get this fluid out of here, there's a lot of fluid in our stomach, you're going to run the risk of getting that fluid out of your body prior to it actually being absorbed into your cells. So you could have clear urine, be peeing a ton, but still actually be dehydrated because the water could not get into your cells.
Hmm. Okay. Yeah, that's super helpful. Now I kind of want to segue into sleep a little bit. Okay. And so like you talked a little bit about, you've alluded to time management. I think that's obviously key for any student athlete. Obviously they got their classes, they got their homework, they got study hall, they got this meeting, strength and conditioning. They've got meetings with you, meetings with us, film, practice, games. And so um sleep sometimes is the thing that they sacrifice. Okay. And
Mhm.
so I remember seeing a study a couple years back about Stanford's basketball team. Okay. And
Mhm.
so they were doing like 9, 10, 11, 12 hours of sleep, and their free throw percentage just skyrocketed.
Yeah.
Okay. And so obviously increased levels of focus, concentration. But yeah, could you touch on that real quick?
Sure. Yeah, I think that's one of those things where a decrease in sleep is going to negatively affect everything you do. And for a college athlete, I mean, the first and foremost reasons why you're there is to learn.
Yeah.
And we cannot retain the information that we're learning, be that, through a film session or in the classroom, if you're consistently undersleeping. If you're pulling all nighters, it could take several days to actually mentally and physically recover from that.
Wow.
So you're kind of cheating yourself by like, all right, I'm going to try to get ahead of my schoolwork or whatever it may be. You're cheating yourself, and you're not actually able to reap the investment that you just made in yourself if
Hmm.
we're not getting adequate sleep. So increased risk of illness and infection go up with lack of sleep, as does risk of injury. Decision making and learning decrease. Your reaction time is delayed. Quicker time to exhaustion and decreased accuracy in skill specific tasks. Those are all terrible things for a student or an athlete. So, making time for yourself, strategic time management is really important. It's a skill that student athletes have to learn. So if something's not working, you have to kind of find a way like, all right, what's the biggest priority today? And when am I going to set a time for me to go to sleep? I go into sleep at 10 o'clock every night because after 10 o'clock, I feel like crap the next day and I don't get anything productive done. So it really does come down to time management on those things.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the misconception is that their coaches won't be able to tell. We know. We know who didn't sleep well. We can see. And so great wealth of information. This is so cool. Again, a topic that probably doesn't get covered enough, but every time I have someone on the show, I
Mhm.
always want to open it up to them. Okay. And so this could be your time to say happy holidays to the audience. This could be your time to say, hey, like, high school students, you need to do X, Y, and Z while you still have the time. Maybe this is your time to say, like, hey, this is something that, is on my heart, something that I see, something, whatever the case is. If you wanted to open up to maybe I can put your email in the comments if you
Mhm.
have questions. But yeah, the floor is yours, and then I'll wrap us up here at the end.
Sure. Yeah. Well, again, thank you so much for having me on. I think with the remaining time, I'll probably touch on a couple of like the big items that I see from incoming freshmen and
Okay.
from college athletes in general. A lot of these things stem from what is happening at the high school level. Because unfortunately, there's not a lot of dietitians at the high school level. Um, the first one I would say is body composition. Specifically for female athletes, I think there's maturation, there's growth, not always in the way that women want to see. There's self comparison to others. There's insecurities. There's a lot of emotions and comparison and outside influence on female athletes, and a lot of female athletes don't know what to do about that.
Mm.
From a performance perspective, and I just emailed the coaching staff at LU this, but from a World Cup level, there's really not a justification for any specific weight or any specific height for an athlete, and that's coming from the World Cup analysis. Performance is not impacted by height, and it's not impacted by weight specifically. So there's a million different ways and a million different shapes. And body sizes that can be healthy, beautiful, and can perform well. You're beautiful just the way God made you, and no one should tell you any different. That doesn't mean that we can't increase our strength or that we don't want to be better at something, but the comparison to others is something that I warn against, and I think it's something worth talking about with your coach, with your parents, or with your teammates. That open discussion, I think, allows it to be destigmatized. I think
Mm.
that helps prevent a lot of internal dilemma with female athletes and male athletes and can help prevent eating disorders. Specifically, that internal drive to be something different often spurs, a lack of appetite or maybe some other behaviors that are, disordered in nature and, can lead to some negative health effects. So talk with your coaches and with your parents about those things, have that open discussion, and just know that like from a performance perspective and from, God's perspective, you're doing fine. You're great. That's I think the biggest thing that I would want to address with any high school athlete. The second one in terms of, again, female specific health, it's not okay to not have a menstrual cycle. It's not okay. If you are losing your menstrual cycle or if you've not had it by about the age of 16, you should tell your doctor, you should tell your parents. I think that is a discussion that, again, can be stigmatized and unjustly so. The menstrual cycle is very important to bone health and to female reproductive health. And it's something that I want every single one of our female athletes to have. And I work with quite a few athletes across NCAA sports on getting their period back if they lose it. It's very important to long-term bone health. And during your adolescence, through high school and through your early 20s is when you're forming your bones. So it's incredibly important for female health and for long-term health. So absolutely, without a doubt, please talk to your physician and your parents if you're not menstruating. And I understand that may be taboo. Outside of that, there's not a lot of supplements that can really benefit soccer performance. There's maybe 3 or 4. All supplements should be run through a dietitian first, and they should be third-party tested with an NSF or Informed Sport certification. And if you can understand those last 3 things there, I mean, you're preventing a lot of issues coming into the NCAA level. Yeah, there's a lot that goes into to health and performance and nutrition. So if anyone has any additional questions or concerns or is looking for additional resources, AMWINNICKI at liberty.edu is my email address. Feel free to shoot me an email and ask a question, or if you need a dietitian in your area, I'm happy to help you find one.
Great. Well, like I said, really a pleasure to have you on the show. I know every time I talk to you, I'm just like, man, I really should have wrote some stuff down. So I think I'll be using this as a resource just as much as our audience. But again, thank you. We appreciate you. I'm sure loads of people will have some follow-up questions. And so, Alex, you are a friend of the show. We wish you happy holidays. And yeah, thanks to our audience for viewing.
Awesome. Thank you all so much.